The Burundi robotics team goes missing after a competition in Washington, D.C. We'll have a live update. Health experts struggle to bridge the divide between anti-vaccination groups and sound science. And an app's new facial recognition feature worries privacy advocates. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCorry. This is Africa 54. 6 teenage members of the Burundi robotics team have been reported missing after competing in an international competition in the United States. Washington, D.C. police tweeted missing person flyers Wednesday asking for help finding the teens last seen in the area of the first global challenge around the time of Tuesday's final marches. Now, the Washington Post reports that competition organizers said in a statement that the team's mentor couldn't find the group of 6 students, but reports were submitted to police. Each report says police tried to contact one missing teen's uncle, but got no response. Now, VOA's Ariane Etangisheka joins me to tell us more about this young people. First, I know that you are actually personally in contact with the person you mentioned as the mentor. So what more can you tell us?
Well, when the team was supposed to be with us here, Voice of America, the Central Africa Division show yesterday morning, when they didn't call me about 8 a.m., I contacted them, say, are you still coming? And the team counselor kind of didn't want to say much, but at that point, I knew something wasn't right because our live show is at 10 a.m. And so after I probed more, he said, unfortunately, we won't be able to make it. I can't find the youth, the group. And I said, how is that? And then he just was a bit reluctant to say more. But eventually, as I probed more throughout the day, he mentioned to me that the children disappeared. He didn't know where they were, but that, you know, he's going to go back to Burundi.
Now, when people are said to have disappeared, the police are actually handing out flyers, people start worrying. What do you know up to this point? Is there any reason to be concerned about their safety?
Definitely not. From my understanding with the team leader, it seems as if he had maybe overheard that they weren't going to go back to Burundi and that they had other plans. And so he, in hearing that or understanding that, he continued with his plans to go back to Burundi as planned.
And now, they were not planning to go back. Do they have contacts in the United States? Is there somebody who probably was going to coordinate that particular move?
We're not sure, but most likely. These youth are between the ages of 16 and 18. And so certainly, for them to be able to take that decision, I'm sure they must have some help. Otherwise, you know, they'll be in the streets, sleeping on the street.
It's not every time young people who go to another country to participate in a competition just disappear. Are there reasons why a young person like that may want not to go back to Burundi?
Obviously, yes. In my interview with them, I asked them, what do you think about Washington? They say, we love the city, we love the buildings, it's a new place for us, and we've made new friends. And so they have every reason to believe that they have arrived in a modern and a very developed country that's going to offer them more than they could probably get in Burundi. So yes, the idea could be there to say, we'd rather stay here than to go back.
Yeah, but how are things in Burundi? And, you know, that may kind of give a motivation for some young person to stay.
I think some young people at this point sometimes feel that there's no lack of opportunity in terms of when they finish schools, the lack of jobs and the lack of different opportunities that they see here in America. And so the poverty rate and, you know, the lack of jobs and lack of activities for young people could push a teenager to want to stay in a developed country like the U.S.
Is there a concern that perhaps their parents, their family members might get in trouble because of this?
Probably there could be. There could be if they help them organize it, because, again, as I said, it's very difficult to think that a young person can take such a decision to stay in a foreign land without any assistance. And so probably family members did help. And we've seen in the past before where they cross over the border and go to Canada, as the 2 of them already done so. So the other 4 are probably also trying to do the same.
So you've confirmed that 2 of those 6 have actually crossed over to Canada, and that was pretty quick.
Correct. We've contacted the police department, and they've confirmed that 2 have already crossed the border.
Thank you very much for sharing that information with us, Oriel.
Thank you very much.
Well, that is Orion Etangisheka. Now, on another note, the team from South Sudan won the gold medal for courageous achievement at that first Global Robotics Challenge. Now, children in the South Sudanese town of Yei want their leaders to take a more serious approach towards restoring peace in the country so they will be able to learn on a safe environment. Yei is located about 150 kilometers south of the capital, Juba, and is a strategic outpost on the main trading route with Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. About 70% of the population fled last year after fierce fighting erupted between government and opposition forces, leaving Yei largely a ghost town. However, some children remain, including a number of orphans who have sought a sanctuary in a local Catholic school, which has managed to stay open throughout the crisis. Now the children depend on 14 volunteer teachers to learn.
I don't have parents. My parents are all dead. I don't have education. I am the one who support myself in education. But now I don't have anything to support myself in education because I don't have money to support myself.
Let them bring peace to South Sudan so that South Sudanese children should enjoy their life like the one of ago.
Well, now, David Shearer, the chief of the UN mission in South Sudan, recently held a meeting with political, community and religious leaders to discuss security in the region.
This grassroots peace process, we want them to take the lead. It's much better that local people take the lead and we come in and support in whatever we can do, rather than the UN come in as the great saviours, which I don't think we do as well as the local peoples.
Well, Shearer's visit follows the publication of a UN report in May, which documents human rights violations and abuses against civilians by both parties to the conflict between July 2016 and January 2017. Well, instability and crime in sub-Saharan Africa has led to the rise of private military and security companies, farms that are being used for everything from protecting mines and oil terminals to conducting full military operations. But ensuring that these private guns follow national laws and international norms is a challenge. More from VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young.
Military people use guns. So do people employed by private military and security companies, PMCs and PSCs. Nations normally hold a monopoly on the use of lethal force in their defense. But these private armed entities can gain the right to kill by permission of the governments that hire them, as spelled out in contracts. The lines separating a country's military from private contractors are set forth by the former head of industry trade group, the International Stability Operations Association, Doug Brooks.
When you look at the difference between what a private security company does versus a military, it's really defined by their rules. And the military has rules of engagement, which are forced to achieve a goal. Whereas a private security company is protective and defensive. Essentially, they're only allowed to respond to attacks. They can protect themselves, they can protect whatever's in their contract.
While the activities of these private guns are defined with states and commercial entities such as mines and oil companies, keeping an eye on these forces can be difficult. Or in some cases, the limits are simply not properly enforced. A point raised via Skype from Barbados by National Defense University professor Ian Ralby.
And that is always the concern, that they will operate in a way that is, as you say, unaccountable and irresponsible. So the delegation of the right to use force is not so much the problem. The delegation of the right to use force without any other constraints relating to accountability and legal backing is really where the concern lies.
Private military companies created bloodbaths in Sierra Leone and Angola during the 1990s in support of those governments in the face of insurgents. And PMCs hired by the United States, especially a company called Blackwater, gained a reputation in Iraq following the 2003 war there for resorting to massive firepower to intimidate both insurgents and civilians. Blackwater created a major U.S.-Iraq incident in 2007 when Blackwater contractors opened fire on civilians at Baghdad's Nisour Square, killing 17 people. With the U.S. Africa Command expanding its presence and reach across the continent, it does so mindful of the hard lessons learned from its experiences with PMCs in Iraq and Afghanistan. Via Skype from Oxford, Britain, King's College analyst Christopher Kinsey.
I think that's the area that AFCON can actually learn. How do you if you're going to use companies to project lethal force, how do you make sure they do that without jeopardizing your operations, i.e. turning the local people against you?
In 1998, the South African government of Nelson Mandela passed a law banning South African citizens from being involved with private military companies. This caused the closure of several such entities. Then, in 2008, South Africa, Angola, Sierra Leone, the United States, and 14 other nations signed the International Committee of the Red Cross's Montreux document, which governs the behavior of private military companies in conflict zones. The document presently has the signatures of 54 states and 3 major international organizations. Analysts say that this agreement, now a series of recommendations, is likely to become codified as international law over time, holding both nations and private companies far more liable for their actions. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Well, Cameroonian forces have been torturing suspects in their campaign against Islamic group Boko Haram, but much of the torture happening at a base that has also been used by American and French troops, as according to rights group Amnesty International. Now, the Amnesty report says some of the victims were tortured to death. The Deputy Regional Director of Research at Amnesty International West and Central Africa, Stephen Cockburn, says it is not the first report the rights group has published on secret detention centers and torture by elite forces in Cameroon. But it is the first time they have gathered so much evidence from more than 100 documented cases showing alleged abuses into detention centers run by Cameroon's Rapid Intervention Battalion in Fotokol and Salak.
So what we've seen is a much more brutal treatment handed out to people who've been arrested, often without evidence, suspected of supporting Boko Haram. We've many testimonies of people who've been put in agonizing stress positions with their hands and their feet tied behind their back, left for days out in the open and savagely beaten. Also people who've been drowned and electrocuted and had their fingernails pulled out. These are really extreme treatment that's been meted out to these detainees, and they've been kept in quite horrific conditions, cramped cells, and not been allowed to be in contact with their family or their lawyers, often for months at a time.
Well, the U.S. Africa Command says it has not received any reports of human rights abuses by Cameroonian forces at the base mentioned. Now, a Cameroon Defense Ministry spokesman accused Amnesty of bad faith and of trying to transform killers into victims. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Now find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, health professionals take on vaccine skepticism. Stay with us.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America, on air, online, on the go.
Well, 35 European children have died from measles in the past 12 months in what the World Health Organization calls an unacceptable tragedy. The deaths could have been prevented by a vaccine. A recent measles outbreak in Minnesota sent nearly 24 people to hospital. Still, some parents in developed countries continue to believe false reports that the measles vaccine causes autism. And now a number of parents are refusing to get their children vaccinated for other diseases as well. VOA's Carol Pearson reports.
A vaccine ended smallpox. Another vaccine is close to ending polio. Besides polio, vaccines prevent the flu, hepatitis, liver cancer, cervical, oral, and penile cancers, and a dozen or so other diseases. They have saved countless lives and prevented enormous suffering. Scientists are now working on vaccines for AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis.
The immunization and vaccines are the most powerful public health tool that we have.
One of the most effective vaccines available to prevent measles, mumps, and rubella is meeting resistance from many parents because of a debunked study that linked the vaccine to autism. Yet some parents oppose all vaccines.
We don't want anybody to force anything on our children. As parents, it's our decision whether or not we want to vaccinate.
We, the parents, have the right.
In the U.S., it's become a parents' rights issue.
We now in the state of Texas have 50,000 kids whose parents are opting them out of getting vaccinated.
Doctors feel strongly about the benefits of vaccines. Dr. Hope Scott lost a daughter to pneumococcal meningitis 5 years before a vaccine became available.
Had she been born 5 years later, or had that vaccine been out 5 years earlier, I would have 3 children, not 2. And it is hard for me to have conversations with people who choose not to vaccinate because, you know, I would give anything to be able to trade places with them. You know, I'd give $1 million on my right arm to have had the opportunity to vaccinate my child and save her life. And I didn't have that opportunity.
Doctors and other health professionals wonder how to convince parents that vaccines will keep their children healthy.
I think the approach towards people who are anti-vaccinated is to respect their opinion and don't denigrate them and don't criticize them, but try to explain to them on the basis of solid evidence why the risk-benefit of vaccines clearly favors very, very heavily towards vaccinating your children.
In an opinion piece published in the Seattle Times newspaper, autism expert Annette Esty said health professionals need to urgently find a way out of our impasse and rediscover the connections between those who oppose immunizations and the medical community. The American Medical Association has plans to continue to promote public understanding and confidence in the safety of vaccines. Some European countries now make vaccines against measles and other diseases mandatory. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
So, who makes the best West African rice dish, otherwise known as jollof? The Jollof Festival, a competition to claim bragging rights for the best jollof rice in West Africa, was held recently here in Washington. Now, to tell us more about who won and what next, I'm joined by a gentleman, Oro Ofori, who is involved in organizing that event. Welcome, Oro, to Africa 54.
Nice to be here, Vincent.
Yeah,
Thanks
so
for having me.
Why jollof rice? I mean, there's so many other dishes that are prepared in West Africa. Right. They're great. Why that particular one?
Jollof rice is one of the most popular dishes from Africa, and it started out in West Africa, Senegal to be precise. And it started out in the Wolof area, and so it's kind of like a corrupt version of the name of the town, Wolof, to Jollof. And it's a one-pot meal with a stew base with rice, and people throw in tomatoes and other vegetables, and you can have it with your choice of meat or poultry. And yeah, some people go with fish, but mostly it's chicken or meat.
Chicken.
Yeah.
Now, given that it started in Senegal, it is a cultural dish from the Wolof people. Right. You would expect in this competition Senegal won. Was that the case?
No, Senegal didn't win, actually.
What happened? Who won?
The real owners of Jollof didn't win. But there was an upset, actually.
Yeah.
Ghana was there, and Nigeria was there. Sierra Leone was there. But for some good reason, Nigeria won. Nigeria won the first ever Jollof festival that happened here at the Toolbox in Washington, D.C. And it was surprising because a lot of people were hoping to see Ghana win because Ghana is known to have a better jollof than Nigeria, according to what is said online. Yeah. So
now, you know, we hope to have some nice images, but something went wrong. The question is, right, what really makes the difference between one dish of jollof rice and the other? I would imagine the ingredients are pretty much the same.
Yeah, the ingredients are pretty much the same, but, you know, it's pretty much everyone has their special touch. Everyone has their magic touch, and it's a competition. So they wouldn't tell you this is my magic touch, but basically it's just a rice dish stewed up with tomatoes and vegetables and all that, and then you put your preferred choice of meat or chicken, whether fried or boiled. Yeah. But the Nigeria jollof, for some reason, came out tops. Okay. And now Nigerians are all over the place saying we won the first ever Jollof festival. Yeah. And,
well, that's a festival, and the competition is over food. Now, were there varieties of Jollof, let's say, from one particular country, so that somebody doesn't claim it's all about who prepared, rather than whoever prepared from Nigeria actually did a good job.
Every competitor was allowed one kind of jollof to represent, their country's jollof in general. So, and it wasn't only about jollof. The Jollof Festival had the Ankara Bazaar. The Ankara Bazaar is a display of African cultural clothing and body products and fashion stuff. And also there was just a platform where people could network and get to know each other over the power of Jollof. So it wasn't just about food. Now, the producer of the Jollof Festival is called Ishmael Osetre. Ishmael Osetre is head of Afropolitan Delight. And what Afropolitan Delights basically do is to sell and spread the African culture in the diaspora, and make Africans become more known and also tell the true story of what Africa is about, both in the diaspora and off the continent. And they contracted me. I am the founder of the African Dream LLC, and the African Dream LLC is an information and communication consultancy. And so I know Osetre and Afropolitan Delight, and they were like, hey, would you come in and give us some, shout outs and do our media coverage for us? So I gladly accepted it. It was.
So, I mean, you're making sure that although the Africans have left the continent, they came with their culture, they came with their food.
Exactly.
Now, there's another event, I don't know, is it a follow-up now on the 23rd in New York? What is that?
So it's going to be a follow-up, actually. It's going to be an opportunity for those in New York to have a feel of what the Jollof Festival was like out here when we had it, the maiden edition here in D.C. So it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be Jollof, basically. There are going to be competitors from respective countries, and there's going to be the Ankara Bazaar, which is going to sell the African culture by way of clothing, by way of body products, and through networking. And of course, we're going to give everyone an opportunity to know what Africa is truly about. It's
going to be another competition there, like a Super Bowl of Jollof rice.
Yeah, Super Bowl of Jollof rice. And mind you, Jollof Festival, it's a thing on its own. Yeah. It's a way we're selling the African culture, but we're doing it through food, because food is bringing everyone together. Everybody likes to eat. I mean,
so let me ask you this, because I come from East Africa. Is it biased? Does it exclude
It's totally not biased. It's totally not biased. There is room for every country in Africa, including the ones that don't even prepare jollof.
Because we prepare rice, but in a different way. We just don't call it jollof. We do something.
There's room for everyone. So so long as you qualify during the hackathon and the cook-off to go represent your country in the finals, you're welcome to participate. And it's, like I said, it's open to everyone, including non-Africans as well. And if you know how to do jollof and you do it authentically, and you participate and you win, then you win.
Then you become an individual. You don't represent a country, right? You're not representing Ghana or Nigeria at that time.
If I could, I'd represent Ghana, but it'd be a little biased. So
no, thank you very much. Thanks
and I'd like to say thank you to Ishmael Osetre once again of Afropolitan Delight and Insights, actually, and Leslie Tita of IO Spaces, who was the sponsor of the winning prize, and the first winner of the Made in Jollof Festival here in Washington, D.C., Atinukwe Ogunsola. She's from Queensway Restaurant.
You're really fast. Shout out to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Vincent. We appreciate it.
Well, that is Oral Ofori, and we thank him for joining us today. They are organizers of the Jollof Festival. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, and apps' new face profiles could make augmented reality just more accessible and controversial as well. We'll be right back.
If you've
just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
In Ivory Coast, Defense Minister describes gunmen as thieves who stole stocks of weapons during a raid on their coordination and operational decisions center. In Senegal, new houses are being built in the southern Casamance region, once populated by ruined buildings. In South Sudan, children are asking their leaders to find a way to restore peace so their government can enable them to have a safe learning environment.
And these children should enjoy their life like the one of ago.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Well, it's called bleeping. Using the Bleeper app, the smartphone can recognize a face and displays a profile, including mood, favorite song, and recent tweet. The app's latest update, named Halos, allows users to create and customize an augmented reality face profile. They can be viewed by just pointing a smartphone's camera towards a user's face or even a photograph. Using artificial intelligence, the app analyzes unique features and recognizes the face, displaying their profile on screen. Responding to privacy concerns, Bleeper says users must be at least 16 years old. Users can make themselves invisible with a simple tap on their screen. Well, in Brazil, a new app is aiming to reveal the hidden history of Rio de Janeiro's old port area. A non-profit and investigative journalism agency, Agência Pública, developed the app Museum of Yesterday, which takes visitors on a historical tour of the area. Inspired by the hit augmented reality game Pokemon Go, the app makes use of its users' geolocation and only reveals the stories once they arrive at the location where the events took place. Now, the app offers tours in Portuguese and English, revealing the area's history from colonization and the arrival of slave ships to recent cases of corruption. Well, and finally, the first images taken by camera drone robot Intball are in. The spherical drone has been deployed by the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency on board the module Kibo on the International Space Station. Intball is made from 3D printed parts and existing drone technology. It is controlled by researchers at the JAXA Tsukuba Space Center. Taking photographs and video can take up to 10% of an astronaut's working hours, as according to JAXA, which hopes to free up that time for other onboard tasks. JAXA also wants to allow ground researchers to watch the crew in real time as they conduct experiments. And that is what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. And for more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the morning today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. From all of us here, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A plate is a dish that you put your food on.
Have a lot on your plate. Hey Anna, I'm having a party this weekend. You should come.
I wish I could, but my weekend is really busy. I'm baking a wedding cake, writing my article, teaching 2 classes, and oh, my parents are visiting.
Wow, you have a lot on your plate.
I do.